The silence inside Whitmore's, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, was the kind that hummed. Knives froze mid-air, conversations dissolved like steam, glasses remained suspended in hands that forgot what they were lifting. All eyes had turned toward the small space between two tables, where 10-year-old Eli Whitmore, legs trapped in metal braces, stood trembling. His hand was extended. Across from him, Maya Brooks, the restaurant's only black waitress, stood still, her tray half lowered, her expression unreadable. The grand piano had just begun a soft jazz waltz, and the boy's impulse had come without warning. For 2 years since the car crash that left him partially paralyzed, Eli had barely spoken in public. But now he wanted to dance. And he'd chosen her. Mr. Campbell, the restaurant manager, snapped, "Sir, control your son. This is not a dance hall, and our staff are not here to entertain your family." At the center table sat Charles Whitmore, Eli's father, head of Whitmore Global Holdings, one of the wealthiest and most feared men on the East Coast. Charles swallowed hard. He hadn't brought Eli out to dinner since the accident. The boy's impulsive plea felt like a personal failure. "Eli," he said in a low, clipped voice, "sit down." But the boy's hand remained outstretched. His braces squeaked as he took a tentative step closer to Maya. She didn't move. 5 years working in this place had taught her to be invisible, especially to men like Charles Whitmore. "Mr. Campbell," she said quietly, removing her apron, "my shift's over." The room gasped. Maya gently placed the apron on the tray and turned back to Eli. A warm smile slowly formed. "I can't dance in uniform," she said. Charles stood. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm accepting an invitation, sir," Maya replied, holding his gaze, unshaken. Eli's foot dragged across the polished floor. The metal brace shrieked. But Maya didn't hurry him. She didn't guide him. She simply matched his pace. A woman at the next table leaned in to whisper, "She's getting fired tomorrow." Charles couldn't move. A memory clawed at his chest, his late wife twirling Eli across the living room. "It's not about perfection," she used to say. "It's about connection." That's what he saw now. Connection. Eli was concentrating, not clinging, not asking for help. He was leading. "Mr. Whitmore," Campbell said nervously beside him, "I can assure you this will never happen again. She will be reprimanded, immediately." But Charles wasn't listening. All he could hear was the soft rhythm of Eli's steps and the boy's smile, something he hadn't seen in years. Maya led Eli back to his table after 3 imperfect, unforgettable steps. "Thank you for asking me to dance," she said with grace. "It was an honor." Then she turned to leave. "Wait." Charles' voice sounded unfamiliar to even himself. He reached into his jacket and handed her a card. "My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The restaurant held its breath. Maya accepted the card, her face calm, but her hand trembled just enough for only Eli to notice. As she walked away, Eli looked up at his father. "Dad, why did you do that?" Charles couldn't answer. Not yet. He looked at the boy, his boy, and for the first time since Elizabeth's death, he didn't just see a fragile child or a medical case. He saw a full person. Someone he had overlooked for far too long. Dinner resumed in awkward silence, but no one forgot what they had witnessed. And Maya, as she exited into the night, didn't glance back in fear or regret. She walked forward with a determination stronger than the storm gathering in Charles Whitmore's eyes. The card sat untouched on the nightstand for 2 days. Maya Brooks stared at it more than once, tempted to throw it away. But something about the simplicity of the silver letters, Charles Whitmore, office of the CEO, felt like a tether to a storm she wasn't sure was over. She never called, but she didn't need to. On Wednesday afternoon, just as Maya finished taping up a cracked mirror in the dance studio, her sister Naomi burst through the side door of the community center, breathless. "There's a Bentley outside," Naomi said, eyes wide. You won't believe who's inside. Maya didn't need to look. She already knew. Through the dusty window of the studio, she saw the sleek black car parked by the curb, engine still running. In the back seat, Eli Whitmore stared anxiously through the glass. And in the front, Charles Whitmore, unmoving, hands gripping the wheel as if he were still in traffic court instead of parked outside a crumbling community warehouse in the Bronx. He's not coming in, Naomi muttered, adjusting the edge of her headscarf. Men like him don't come to places like this. Don't underestimate the power of a determined son, Maya said, almost to herself. As if on cue, the back door of the Bentley opened. Slowly, cautiously, Eli stepped out. He adjusted one of the braces on his leg, then looked up at the entrance. Naomi gasped. He actually got out. Then the front door opened. Charles Whitmore emerged in a soft sweater and pressed slacks. An effort to dress down, but still so unmistakably him. Expensive even in his attempt at humility. I told you he'd come, Maya said quietly. Naomi stared at her. What did you do? I followed a step, Maya said. Inside, the studio pulsed with music. Children with mobility devices moved. Across the open floor, a girl in a wheelchair spun in slow, deliberate circles. A boy with a prosthetic leg created a rhythmic step with remarkable precision. It was beautiful and chaotic. Charles followed Maya in, his eyes scanning the space with barely concealed discomfort. It looks disorganized, Charles said, frowning. There is structure, Maya replied gently. Just not the kind you're used to. She turned to Eli, who was watching the other children with awe. Would you like to join? Maya asked. Eli nodded immediately, then glanced at his father for permission. Charles hesitated, then said, Go on. I'll be right here. As Maya guided Eli toward the group, Naomi approached Charles and offered a folding chair. The first day is always the hardest, Naomi said. For the kids? Charles asked. Naomi shook her head. For the parents. From the far door, an older woman entered, leaning on an ornate cane. Her gray hair was arranged in elegant braids. Her presence shifted the air. Charles's eyes narrowed. Dr. Helena Price, Naomi whispered to him. Neuroscientist, retired from Harvard, specialist in motor cognition and brain plasticity. Dr. Price scanned the room with warm eyes before spotting Charles. Mr. Whitmore, she said, approaching him. You've rejected my research proposals 3 times in the last 2 years. Dr. Price, Charles said stiffly. I didn't expect to see you here. I oversee the research program, Dr. Price explained. We're studying how non-directive movement approaches affect neuroplasticity in children with motor challenges. Charles blinked. I thought this was a dance class. Maya returned just in time to hear him. Freedom Steps, Maya said, is a pilot rehabilitation program based on the theory of movement autonomy. We integrate adaptive dance with applied neuroscience. Then why are you waitressing? Charles asked bluntly. If you're running a research program? Because we don't have the funding, Maya answered. And because people like you rejected us. Dr. Price stepped forward. She was my co-author on those proposals, Mr. Whitmore. And the lead theorist. Maya's work is groundbreaking. Her master's degree is incomplete because she left school to take care of her sister. But her contribution is not academic. It's lived. Charles looked stunned. You knew who I was the night in the restaurant, Charles said slowly, the realization dawning. Maya nodded. From the moment you walked in. And when Eli stood up to dance? That part wasn't planned, Maya said. He chose to move. I chose to follow. At that moment, a door opened behind them. A small group of local journalists entered, carrying cameras and clipboards. Charles tensed immediately. What is this? Charles asked, his voice Low. Part 2 of your plan? Naomi walked over holding a freshly printed article. We just published our first data results, Naomi said. We invited the press. It's part of our outreach strategy. You used my son, Charles said coldly, for a PR stunt. No, Maya said, stepping closer. We used your silence. She gestured toward a hallway off the main room. Come, with me. He followed her into a quieter space where photos of dozens of children lined the walls, each photo accompanied by handwritten notes, milestones, stats, first movements. At the far end of the wall, there was an empty picture frame. What's that? Charles asked. Our future, Maya said. The full-scale rehabilitation center we could build. One that serves 500 children a year instead of 50. You orchestrated all this, Charles muttered. The dance, the meeting, the press. I saw an opening, Maya replied. 4 months ago, you canceled our meeting without reading the proposal. I promised myself I'd find another way. Before Charles could respond, Naomi burst in. It's Eli. They rushed back into the main room. Eli stood in the center, surrounded by the other children. The music had stopped. The chatter had gone. Silent. Everyone was watching him. One of his braces lay on the floor. He was trying to balance with just one. Eli! Charles started forward. Maya stopped him with a whisper. Wait, watch. Eli took a breath, concentrated, his face calm but intense, and stepped. 1 foot, then the next, small, shaky, but entirely his. The children cheered. Cameras clicked. Charles stood frozen, blinking hard. His throat tightened as emotion surged past decades of restraint. That's why we built Freedom Steps, Maya said softly. Not for perfect steps, for each first ones. Charles didn't answer. Not yet, but the moment was his, and so was the choice. The card sat untouched on the nightstand for 2 days. Maya Brooks stared at it more than once, tempted to throw it away. But something about the simplicity of the silver letters. Charles Whitmore, office of the CEO, felt like a tether to a storm she wasn't sure was over. She never called. But she didn't need to. On Wednesday afternoon, just as Maya finished taping up a cracked mirror in the dance studio, her sister Naomi burst through the side door of the community center, breathless. There's a Bentley outside, Naomi said, eyes wide. You won't believe who's inside. Maya didn't need to look. She already knew. Through the dusty window of the studio, she saw the sleek black car parked by the curb, engine still running. In the back seat, Eli Whitmore stared anxiously through the glass. And in the front, Charles Whitmore, unmoving, hands gripping the wheel as if he were still in traffic court instead of parked outside a crumbling community warehouse in the Bronx. He's not coming in, Naomi muttered, adjusting the edge of her headscarf. Men like him don't come to places like this. Don't underestimate the power of a determined son, Maya said, almost to herself. As if on cue, the back door of the Bentley opened. Slowly, cautiously, Eli stepped out. He adjusted one of the braces on his leg, then looked up at the entrance. Naomi, gasped. He actually got out. Then, the front door opened. Charles Whitmore emerged in a soft sweater and pressed slacks. An effort to dress down, but still so unmistakably him. Expensive even in his attempt at humility. I told you he'd come, Maya said quietly. Naomi stared at her. What did you do? I followed a step, Maya said. Inside, the studio pulsed with music. Children with mobility devices moved across the open floor. A girl in a wheelchair spun in slow, deliberate circles. A boy with a prosthetic leg created a rhythmic step with remarkable precision. It was beautiful and chaotic. Charles followed Maya in, his eyes scanning the space with barely concealed discomfort. It looks disorganized, Charles said, frowning. There is structure, Maya replied gently. Just not the kind you're used to. She turned to Eli, who was watching the other children with awe. Would you like to join? Maya asked. Eli nodded immediately, then glanced at his father for permission. Charles hesitated, then said, Go on, I'll be right here. As Maya guided Eli toward the group, Naomi approached Charles and offered a folding chair. The first day is always the hardest, Naomi said. For the kids? Charles asked. Naomi shook her head. For the parents. From the far door, an older woman entered, leaning on an ornate cane. Her gray hair was arranged in elegant braids. Her presence shifted the air. Charles's eyes narrowed. Dr. Helena. Price, Naomi whispered to him. Neuroscientist, retired from Harvard, specialist in motor cognition and brain plasticity. Dr. Price scanned the room with warm eyes before spotting Charles. Mr. Whitmore, she said, approaching him. You've rejected my research proposals 3 times in the last 2 years. Dr. Price, Charles said stiffly. I didn't. Expect to see you here. I oversee the research program, Dr. Price explained. We're studying how non-directive movement approaches affect neuroplasticity in children with motor challenges. Charles blinked. I thought this was a dance class. Maya returned just in time to hear him. Freedom Steps, Maya said, is a pilot rehabilitation program based on the theory of movement autonomy. We integrate adaptive dance with applied neuroscience. Then why are you waitressing? Charles asked bluntly. If you're running a research program? Because we don't have the funding, Maya answered, and because people like you rejected us. Dr. Price stepped forward. She was my co-author on those proposals, Mr. Whitmore, and the lead theorist. Maya's work is groundbreaking. Her master's degree is incomplete because she left school to take care of her sister, but her contribution is not academic. It's lived. Charles looked stunned. You knew who I was the night in the restaurant, Charles said slowly, the realization dawning. Maya nodded. From the moment you walked in. And when Eli stood up to dance? That part wasn't planned, Maya said. He chose to move. I chose to follow. At that moment, a door opened behind them. A small group of local journalists entered, carrying cameras and clipboards. Charles tensed immediately. What is this? Charles asked, his voice low. Part 2 of your plan? Naomi walked over, holding a freshly printed article. We just published our first data results, Naomi said. We invited the press. It's part of our outreach strategy. You used my son, Charles said coldly. For a PR stunt. No, Maya said, stepping closer. We used your silence. She gestured toward a hallway off the main room. Come, with me. He followed her into a quieter space where photos of dozens of children lined the walls, each photo accompanied by handwritten notes, milestones, stats, first movements. At the far end of the wall, there was an empty picture frame. What's that? Charles asked. Our future, Maya said. The full-scale rehabilitation center we could build, one that serves 500 children a year instead of 50. You orchestrated all this, Charles muttered. The dance, the meeting, the press. I saw an opening, Maya replied. 4 months ago, you canceled our meeting without reading the proposal. I promised myself I'd find another way. Before Charles could respond, Naomi burst in. It's Eli. They rushed back into the main room. Eli stood in the center, surrounded by the other children. The music had stopped. The chatter had gone silent. Everyone was watching him. One of his braces lay on the floor. He was trying to balance with just one. Eli, Charles started forward. Maya stopped him with a whisper. Wait. Watch. Eli took a breath, concentrated, his face calm but intense, and stepped, 1 foot, then the next. Small, shaky, but entirely his. The children cheered, cameras clicked. Charles stood frozen, blinking hard. His throat tightened as emotions surged past decades of restraint. That's why we built Freedom Steps, Maya said softly. Not for perfect steps, for first ones. Charles didn't answer. Not yet. But the moment was his, and so was the choice. For a man like Charles Whitmore, silence was a weapon. A tool to dominate boardrooms and disarm adversaries. But in this moment, watching his son take a trembling, independent step without assistance, silence became surrender. Eli's small movement had split something inside him. Not pain, not shame. Something older. A truth he'd buried with Elizabeth. Charles wiped beneath his eye quickly, pretending it was nothing more than a speck of dust. But Maya Brooks saw it. She saw everything. "Would you like to speak with the reporters?" Naomi asked him softly. "No," Charles said, his voice rough. "Not yet." Maya led him to a quieter part of the studio, near the edge of the observation windows. Outside, a group of parents waited for their children, chatting and sipping coffee from paper cups. "This wasn't the plan," Charles muttered, still shaken. "No," Maya replied. "It was his." Charles turned to her sharply. "You manipulated me, every step." "I offered you a card," Maya said evenly. "You chose to follow it." "And the press?" "You rejected our proposal 3 times, Maya reminded him. "The only way to get your attention was to go where your son would lead you." Charles looked toward Eli again, who now laughed, with another boy while practicing a new pivot using his brace like a rhythm stick. "He's never looked like that," Charles said quietly. "Free." Maya let the word hang in the air. Freedom. The very thing Charles had convinced himself Eli couldn't handle. She said, "He doesn't need fixing, Mr. Whitmore. He needs space." Charles turned to her. "You believe all this movement, autonomy, non-directive therapy? You really think dancing like that makes a neurological difference?" "I don't just believe it," Maya said. "I've lived it, and we've measured it. Want to see?" Before he could respond, Dr. Helena Price entered, holding a tablet. She handed it to him without a word. Charts, metrics, scans, brain activity comparisons from before and after 3 months in the program. "It's not just theory anymore," Dr. Price said. "Maya's methodology is producing measurable changes in neural patterning. It's early, but promising." Charles scrolled slowly. The graphs meant something to him. Numbers always did. "Why hasn't anyone else picked this up?" Charles asked. "Because no one funds unconventional methodology," Dr. Price answered. "And we don't fit the mold." "Or maybe," Maya added, "because the people making decisions don't live in our neighborhoods." Charles sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You work as a waitress," Charles said. "But you've built this. Why?" Maya looked him in the eye. "Because my sister had a spinal injury at 14, and we couldn't afford specialists. Because we were told over and over that she would never walk independently again. But no one told her she could move. On her terms. We started experimenting, first with mirrors, then rhythm, then guided chaos." "Guided chaos," Charles repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Controlled unpredictability," Maya said, "where children make the decisions, where they aren't passive in their own treatment." "Medical rehab doesn't work that way," Charles replied. "Exactly," Maya said. "And that's the problem." Charles folded his arms. "And what exactly are you trying to prove?" "That therapy doesn't have to look like therapy," Maya said. "That children, especially children with disabilities, don't need to be micromanaged. They need to be trusted." Charles didn't reply. He was too busy watching Eli spin slowly on one foot with the help of a girl in a wheelchair. Their rhythm was imperfect. Their smiles were not. "You built all of this," Charles said finally, "and no one knows." "We weren't looking for attention," Naomi said, joining them. "Just survival." Charles looked at them both, his mind ticking like a machine rebuilding itself. "What if I funded the program?" he asked. "Full funding, expansion, a new center, State-of-the-art. Naomi's eyes widened. Maya's expression didn't change. Under one condition, Charles added, that the methodology is made proprietary to the Whitmore Foundation. It becomes our intellectual property. Maya shook her head before he finished. No. Charles stared. Excuse me? You want to fund a revolution, Maya said, but still own the flag. I'm offering you everything you asked for. No, Maya said firmly. You're offering control. We're offering freedom. Charles clenched his jaw. He was used to resistance, but not from people with nothing to lose. Then what do you want? He asked. Maya stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but firm. We want full funding and full autonomy. No corporate branding, no boardroom directives, no marketing control. The methodology stays public, and so do the results. Charles stared at her. You're negotiating with me like you're on my level. I'm negotiating with you, Maya replied. Because I am. Another pause. Another silence. This one waited with recognition. Give me a day, Charles said. I'll give you until Eli finishes his session, Maya replied, and with that, she walked away. Charles stayed where he was, watching his son balance 1 foot, arms outstretched, laughing without looking for approval. Dr. Price turned to him. She won't bend, Dr. Price said. Charles nodded. That's why it might actually work. By the time Eli's session ended, the studio had transformed. Parents stood in clusters whispering. Reporters moved quietly, filming with long lenses. Kids laughed, unaware of the storm forming at the edges of the room. At the center of it all, Charles Whitmore sat frozen, elbows on knees, fingers interlaced like a man staring at a chessboard. With no winning move left. Maya Brooks approached with steady steps. Her face held no triumph, only patience. Decision time, Maya said, standing in front of him. I don't like ultimatums, Charles said. It wasn't one, Maya replied. It was a timeline. Charles straightened up. His tone sharpened. You do realize you're talking to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar institution? I do, Maya said, and I'm talking to the all-father of Eli Whitmore. The silence returned, familiar, but this time different. Before he could respond, a young woman with a press badge stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, the reporter said, care to make a comment about your visit to Freedom Steps? Charles stood but didn't face her yet. She continued. Is it true your foundation rejected this program's funding 3 times? Naomi, standing by the far wall, visibly flinched. Maya remained still. Everyone waited. Phones were raised. Cameras clicked. A few studio parents looked uncomfortable, unsure if they were witnessing the birth of something or the end of it. Charles turned to the reporter, finally lifting his head. You know what's hardest for someone in my position? Charles said, admitting when we're wrong. The entire room went still. He continued, the Whitmore Foundation is proud to announce a 5-year commitment to fully fund Freedom Steps and support the construction of a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methods pioneered by Dr. Helena Price and Ms. Maya Brooks. Applause broke out. Someone gasped. One of the kids yelled, "Yeah!" and tried to spin their wheelchair. Naomi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but Maya remained silent, watching Charles closely. Charles raised a finger. One condition, he added, and the room tensed again. Maya's jaw tightened. Charles looked directly at her. That Ms. Brooks retains full creative and scientific control. No corporate branding, no interference. Gasps turned into stunned stares. Maya blinked, just once. Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes said everything. Charles gave her a slight nod. Deal. After the crowd thinned and the press packed up, Maya found Charles sitting alone on a bench near the entrance. His suit jacket had been folded over his arm. For once, he looked normal. Maya walked up slowly. You actually did it. I actually did it, Charles said. You'll have the resources, the land, a blank check. And? Maya asked. Charles turned to her, surprised. And what? Still no apology, Maya said. Charles looked away. I redirected funding, he said. Changed foundation policy. That's not an apology, Maya said. That's compensation. Charles rubbed his temple. I don't know how to say it, he admitted. Maya sat beside him. Start with the truth. Charles was quiet for a long moment. I've spent the last 2 years trying to control Eli's recovery, Charles finally said. I poured money into doctors, therapists, machines, every expert money could buy. None of it worked, and none of it was ever about him. What was it about? Maya asked softly. Me, Charles said. My guilt, my image, my fear. His accident happened on my watch. I wasn't with him. I thought if I could fix it, I'd be forgiven. You don't fix children, Maya said. You raise them. Charles nodded, eyes down. My wife used to say the same thing. What happened to her? Brain aneurysm, sudden. Eli was 6. I'm sorry, Maya said. He was her world. After she died, I buried myself in work and let other people raise him. Then came the accident. It broke more than his legs. It broke everything I hadn't built. And now? Maya asked. Charles looked up at her, his eyes clearer than before. Now I want to learn, Charles said. Not how to fix him, how to be present. Later that evening, Charles drove Eli back to their Upper East Side townhouse. Eli sat in the back, clutching a folded flyer from Freedom Steps. His braces clicked against the car's leather seats, but he didn't seem to care. From the driver's seat, Charles glanced at him in the mirror. You like it there? Charles asked. Eli nodded. I saw a girl spin with just her chair, Eli said. You think you could do that? Maybe, Eli said, if I practice. Charles smiled, caught off guard by how much hope lived in those 2 words. Eli hesitated, then asked, Are we going back? Charles said, Every week. And this time, he meant it. A week later, Charles arrived at his foundation headquarters with a stack of folders and a legal team in tow. The boardroom was filled with polished smiles and suspicious eyes. I'm reallocating 20% of the annual outreach budget to Freedom Steps, Charles announced. Effective immediately. Murmurs broke out. One executive leaned forward. Sir, this wasn't discussed with the advisory panel. Wasn't a request, Charles said. Another advisor said, With all due respect, this program has no legacy reputation. It's community-based, informal. It's revolutionary, Charles replied. And our legacy depends on whether we invest in people or continue branding ourselves with buildings named after dead donors. The room went silent. For once, no one argued. Meanwhile, back in the Bronx, Maya and Naomi stood outside the center with Dr. Price. A letter from the city zoning office had just arrived. The land had been approved. Construction on the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center could begin. Maya stared at the paper like it was a mirage. Dr. Price said, Did you ever imagine this? No, Maya said honestly, but I planned for it. You orchestrated this, didn't you? Naomi said, half teasing. All of it. No, Maya said, a smile tugging at her lips. But I recognized the moment when it arrived, and I stepped in. Dr. Price chuckled. That's what leadership looks like. No, Maya said, glancing toward the studio where Eli was now helping another child fasten a brace. That's what Aunt Freedom Tree looks like. 3 months later, the sound of bulldozers echoed through the Bronx like thunder announcing a storm of change. At the site of what had once been an abandoned lot surrounded by crumbling brick walls, workers in hard hats moved busily between concrete, mixers and stacks of steel beams. But it wasn't just another construction project. This was the future home of FAO, Freedom Steps. Maya Brooks stood at the edge of the site, clipboard in hand, her boots coated in dust. She wore a t-shirt with the program's logo and a baseball cap shielding her eyes from the harsh sun. But she wasn't alone. Eli Whitmore stood beside her, one hand gripping his walking cane, the other shading his eyes as he watched the rising foundation with awe. "This is really happening," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is," Maya replied, offering a smile. "Brick by brick." He looked up at her. "Do you think it'll be done before winter?" "If your father keeps showing up to meetings in person, maybe sooner," Maya said. Eli grinned, as if summoned by the mention of his name. Charles Whitmore appeared behind them, adjusting the sleeves of his light jacket. His presence on site had become a routine, unexpected at first, then quietly consistent. "I heard that," Charles said, approaching. "And for the record, I only missed one meeting." "Only the one that had cake," Maya said, without looking at him. Charles smirked. He stood beside her, watching workers raise one of the steel support beams that would form the center's main hall. "Does it match what you imagined?" Charles asked. Maya exhaled slowly. "Almost, but better. Because now it's not just in my head." Eli moved away to greet two other kids from the program who had arrived to see the construction. Maya and Charles watched him carefully make his way down the path without assistance. "He doesn't use the second brace anymore?" Charles asked. Maya shook her head. "Only on bad days. Most days he's fine with just the cane." Charles looked surprised. His last physical therapist said that wouldn't be possible for at least another 2 years. "You fired her, remember?" Maya said, her voice dry. Charles nodded. "Because you told me she was wrong." "She was," Maya replied. "Eli isn't following a recovery chart. He's writing his own." They watched him help another child sit on a low concrete platform. He was talking, laughing, a leader in his own way. Charles took a breath, then asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. "Why did you never accept my apology?" Maya glanced at him. "Because you never gave one," Maya said simply. Charles looked at the dusty ground, then back at her. "I thought redirecting the foundation's funding, showing up, learning, I thought that was enough." "It's a start," Maya replied, "but it's not the same." Charles didn't speak for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "not just for ignoring your proposal, or for underestimating you, or for treating Eli like a problem to solve. I'm sorry for all the things I didn't see, especially the people who tried to help me see." Maya nodded once. "Now you're getting closer." They stood in silence, the kind that didn't sting. Worker called Maya over to check a foundation blueprint. She walked off without another word, leaving Charles with his thoughts. Later that afternoon, the two met again in the temporary planning trailer. Blueprints were laid across the table, along with paint samples, sketches from kids, and Post-it. Notes stuck everywhere with comments in different handwriting. Charles glanced over the chaos. "Your system is unconventional." "It's democratic," Maya said, flipping through a binder. Every child in the program was asked what they'd like to see in the new center. Charles picked up one of the notes. "A room with stars. On the ceiling. Kiara, age 7. "I'm assuming these requests aren't legally binding," Charles said dryly. "They're emotionally binding," Maya replied. He chuckled, then opened his notebook. To Maya's surprise, it was filled with clippings, highlighted articles, and sticky notes. Scientific notes. "Are you studying now?" Maya asked, amused. "I never thought I'd be reading about neural reconfiguration at 50, Charles said, rubbing his eyes. "What changed?" she asked. He paused, then said, "Eli asked me a question last week." "What was it?" "He asked me if I liked who I was before the accident," Charles said, "and I didn't know how to answer him." Maya looked at him a little surprised. By the honesty, he's not trying to impress anyone anymore, she said. And neither are you. I was a man who could solve anything with money, Charles said. Until I met two people who wouldn't let me. Eli and me? Maya asked. Charles nodded. Maya smiled softly. You should tell him that. I'm trying, Charles said. I just don't want to say the wrong thing. Maya leaned forward. Then stop talking like a CEO and start talking like a dad. Before he could reply, Eli burst into the trailer. Dad! Maya! They're pouring the first base layer! Charles stood, following his son without hesitation. Outside, the cement. Truck released its load into the foundation trench. The children clapped as if something magical were happening. And maybe it was. Eli turned to Charles, excitement glowing on his face. Can I step in it? Just the corner? Maya laughed. We usually wait until it sets. Charles surprised them, both. Let him do it. They all looked at him. I mean it, Charles said. He should leave his mark. Eli smiled as Maya helped him roll up one pant leg and step, carefully, into the wet concrete at the edge. When he lifted his foot, the imprint remained. E. Etched into the foundation of a future he had helped create. Naomi arrived moments later, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Tell me I didn't miss anything symbolic, Naomi said. You did, Maya said, grinning. But we'll tell your kids about it one day. As the sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched across the work site, Charles looked around at the team, the children, the staff. He no longer felt like a visitor. He felt like a student. A father, a man being rebuilt layer by layer, just like the center, just like his son. The day the new Freedom Steps Center opened, the sun rose as if it understood the importance of being generous. A long banner fluttered above the entrance. Your rhythm, your rules. Inside, parents shuffled nervously while children buzzed with anticipation. Cameramen adjusted lenses. Bored. Members from the Whitmore Foundation filed into rows of folding chairs. The center smelled faintly of fresh paint, warm wood, and something else. Hope. Not the vague kind, the lived-in kind. Maya Brooks paced quietly backstage, checking final details. Naomi whispered something about lighting cues, but Maya's eyes were on the kids, especially the one in the center of the formation, holding a cane with silver tape spiraled around its shaft like a sword. Eli Whitmore, no longer in braces, no longer hunched with fear, just a boy in a navy blue shirt, standing tall, waiting for the music. Charles stood near the back of the room, alone, watching it all. He wore no suit today, just a plain sweater, slacks, and the quiet tension of a man who hadn't always deserved to be here. He spotted Maya and walked toward her. Place looks different when it's alive, Charles said. Maya smiled faintly. It was always alive. You just weren't listening before. He nodded. Is he ready? As he'll ever be, Maya replied. Are you? Charles didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Eli. The lights dimmed. The chatter faded. Then, music. A low, slow rhythm. A beat built not for performance, but for movement, for freedom. Eli stepped forward, leading 3 other children. A girl in a wheelchair twirled in her own orbit. A boy with a prosthetic leg created syncopated taps on the wooden floor. A 4th child, still using both braces, kept time with her crutches. Eli moved through it all, carefully, confidently, his cane tapping in rhythm, not as a crutch, but as an instrument. The room held its breath. The dance wasn't flawless, but it was theirs. Maya stood still at the wings, arms crossed over her chest, but her fingers pressed tightly against her ribs, quietly trembling. When the last beat faded, no one clapped at first. They were too stunned. Then the applause erupted like a wave crashing on the shore. Charles didn't clap right away. He just stood there, eyes fixed on his son. Not in awe of his progress, but of his presence. A volunteer approached Maya. "Mr. Whitmore asked for you." She found him near a row of posters on the wall, photos of each child with their name. Their movement milestones, and something new, handwritten goals for the next year. He stood beneath Eli's. It read, "Help someone else find their balance." He wrote that himself, Maya said. Charles's throat worked. He never used to think about the future. Now he makes plans. He's leading now, Maya said. Not just moving forward, bringing others with him. Charles turned to face her. "He doesn't need me to hold him anymore, does he?" "No," Maya said quietly. "But he still needs you to be around. There's a difference." Charles let that sit for a while. "I didn't think I could feel this proud," he said. "Not of what he's overcome, but of what he's created. For others." Maya nodded. "That's what healing really looks like." A reporter approached with a camera. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "how does it feel to see your son on stage like that?" Charles looked at her, then glanced back at Eli, who was now helping a younger girl adjust her harness. He replied, "Proud, not just of my son, but of what he's building." The reporter continued, "And what's been the biggest lesson for you on this journey?" Charles paused. The room went still again, this time listening not for dance steps, but for words that mattered. He said, "That true leaders aren't the ones guiding others down the path they think is right. They're the ones willing to follow when someone shows them a better way." The reporter smiled, nodded, and walked away. Maya remained beside him. She studied his face, saw that the answer had cost him something. "Do you believe it now?" she asked. "What?" "That some things, connection, trust, growth, can't be bought." Charles gave a small laugh, tired but sincere. "I do," he said. Finally. After the event, the children gathered for snacks and photos. Eli pulled Charles aside, tugging gently at his sleeve. "Did you see?" Eli asked. "I did," Charles said, crouching down. "You were incredible." Eli's eyes sparkled. "I didn't fall." "You didn't just stand," Charles said. "You led." Eli smiled, then hesitated. "Can we come back next week?" "We can come back every week," Charles replied. "If you want." "I do," Eli said. "And if you ever want me to stop coming?" Charles asked. Eli thought about it, then shrugged. "Maybe someday." Charles nodded. "That's fair." Behind them, Maya watched silently, not interfering, just observing. A conductor no longer needed to guide the music. Later that night, long after the families had left, Maya remained in the main hall, cleaning up stray balloons and refolding chairs. Naomi joined her, carrying a clipboard of RSVPs. "You realize what just happened, right?" Naomi said. "The center is real. The program's funded. We're legit." Maya exhaled deeply. "We're not done, but yeah, we're real now." Naomi grinned. "You proud of yourself?" "I'm proud of Eli," Maya said, "and a little proud of that stubborn billionaire too." Naomi laughed. "Never thought I'd hear you say that." "He changed," Maya said. "Or maybe he just learned how to listen," Naomi replied. At that moment, Charles reappeared at the entrance, now in his coat, briefcase in hand. He didn't call out. He just stood there a moment, watching the women who had upended his world. He raised a hand. Maya raised hers back. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't have to. The center would be waiting. So would the children. And now, so would he. 1 year later, the Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center no longer smelled like paint and sawdust. Now it smelled like purpose, rubber flooring, washable paint, and the citrusy scent of effort. Laughter bounced off the wide hallways. Movement filled the rooms. Wheelchairs spinning, braces clinking, feet tapping to improvised rhythms. Every corner bore the signature of its users. Murals painted by the kids, handwritten signs, and schedules drawn in colored markers. Maya Brooks, stood in the new atrium, now dubbed the balance room, where children practiced choreographed routines. Surrounded by full-length mirrors, it wasn't sleek, it wasn't silent, but it was alive. A framed plaque near the door read, "Designed by those who dance, not those who watch." Across the floor, Eli Whitmore guided a younger boy through a balancing sequence, his own. Cain now reduced to an occasional tool, not a crutch. His movements, once tentative, now flowed with quiet certainty, not flawless, but his. Maya smiled and made a note on her clipboard. Eli was nearly ready to be certified as a peer guide, one of the program's most advanced student mentors. He was 10. Outside, cars lined up in front of the center. Among them, a black town car pulled up, and Charles Whitmore stepped out, carrying a portfolio under his arm and a reusable coffee cup in his hand. His presence barely raised an eyebrow anymore. He came often now, always stayed longer than scheduled. He entered through the side staff door. In the break room, he found Maya and Naomi huddled over spreadsheets and a grant report. "Board meeting in 10, Charles said, tapping his watch. "You're early," Maya replied, not looking up. "I've been early for 3 months, Charles said. "I take my assignment seriously," Naomi smirked. "Never thought I'd see a billionaire studying pediatric neuroplasticity." Charles held up a well-worn academic paper, still trying to understand page 5. "Most neuroscientists don't understand page 5, Maya said. He handed Maya the portfolio. "Preliminary sketches for the expansion in Chicago." She flipped through them. "This actually isn't bad." "I'm learning," Charles said. "You're following," Maya corrected. He didn't argue. The board meeting took place in a multi-use classroom. No marble tables, no gold-lettered nameplates, just a circle of chairs, a shared Google Doc, and a whiteboard that still had the word bounce underlined 3 times from last week's brainstorming. Eli joined briefly to explain his new warm-up method to the staff. He presented with ease, confidence, joy. Afterward, as the adults wrapped up, Eli found Maya near the storage closet. "I want to help design the next studio," Eli said. Maya tilted her head. "What would you change?" "More light. And speakers." "That move," he said. "So the sound can follow the dancer." Maya grinned. "Start sketching." Later that afternoon, a package arrived for Maya. Inside was a certificate, Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award, Maya Brooks. It came with a handwritten letter from Dr. Helena Price. For proving that movement begins in the heart, long before it reaches the body. Maya placed it gently on a shelf. No fanfare. The award wasn't the point. The movement was. That evening, Charles lingered behind after most had gone. He wandered the hallway where the wall of children's progress photos had grown longer, now occupying an entire side of the building. At the end, a new panel had been added. It read, Year 1, 48 kids, 48 first steps. And beside it, an empty frame labeled, Next 500. Maya appeared beside him, arms crossed. "You think we'll get there?" Charles asked. "We will," Maya said. "The movement speaks for itself." He turned to her, more reflective than usual. "I've been thinking about something." "Go on," she said. "I used to believe power meant control," Charles said. "Now I think it means knowing when to let go." "You've changed," Maya said. "You changed me," he replied. She raised a brow. "No, Eli did," Charles smiled. "Fair enough." They stood quietly for a while. Finally, Charles asked, "Do you think he forgives me?" Maya took a breath. "I don't think Eli thinks about it that way. He doesn't see you as someone who failed. He sees you as someone who showed up and kept showing up." "Do you forgive me?" Charles asked. Maya looked at him. "I don't need to," she said. "You did the work. That's what mattered." At the main entrance, Eli called out, "Dad! Maya! Come see!" They followed the sound to the front doors, where Eli had just finished taping up a new poster he'd designed himself. It read, "First steps don't have to be perfect. They just have to be yours." Charles stood beside his son, taking it. A year ago, he would have asked to change the font, resize the letters, fix the alignment. Today, he simply said, "It's perfect." In the months that followed, Freedom Steps expanded to 3 new cities. Hospitals began integrating the methodology into early motor therapy programs. Maya's research became standard reading in progressive rehab centers, but none of it. It happened with corporate branding. None of it needed billion-dollar ads. It moved through people, through steps, through stories. Eli enrolled in a regular public school with minimal support. On days when his leg tired, he used his cane. On other days he ran, clumsily, joyfully, and he spoke, at conferences, at community events, at new Freedom Steps openings. He spoke not as a child defined by a diagnosis, but as someone who had learned that movement wasn't about ability, it was about agency. And Charles, he still wore suits, still signed deals, still ran an empire. But in the parts that mattered, he followed. He showed up at board meetings not to dictate, but to listen. He read research not to critique, but to understand. He stood in back corners of studios and smiled when children found their balance, without anyone holding them. Maya watched it all with quiet satisfaction. She didn't want credit or headlines. She had her classroom, her notes, her mission, and above all, her students. One evening during the annual review meeting, a young reporter asked her a final question. "Ms. Brooks, what started this movement?" Maya didn't pause. "A boy asked me to dance," she said, "and I said yes."